In this world, some countries strive for independence to the last drop of blood, but some countries, his independence was forced into the hands of the great powers. July 4th, 1946. People all over Manila are partying. American flag lowered. The Philippine flag is raised. Americans have mercy. Voluntarily gave up this peace. They ruled nearly the largest colony in the Far East for half a century. The Philippines was founded. Doesn't that sound terrific? Is it the light of human civilization? But there's no pie in the sky. Freedom to deliver often marked with sky-high price body-selling devices. Why are Americans in a hurry? Let the Philippines become independent. This package is in democracy. Certificate of independence. Under the cloak of freedom, what kind of overlord clause is hidden in the blood? How did he fall into an invisible chain? Completely emasculated the future of the Philippines. Let this former second richest man in Asia. Ultimately, it became a super cannon fodder for today's great power game. Welcome back to the world, reorganizing the life and death of 80 nations. Reading 80 years after World War II. I am the reader Yang Gui. Your support and sharing are the driving force for my update. Today, we will talk about the second birth in 1946 Philippine independent. Painted Skin, the first act of the $20 million Big Blind Box. This place in the Philippines say something heartbreaking. Before I met America, he is a miserable maid who is at the mercy of others. Been whipped by the Spaniards for 333 years. By 1898, veteran empire Spain's Abassi beaten up by the emerging Nouveau Riche America. The Spanish-American War is over. Big Brother America dropped $20 million gold and silver. Tells Spain, these 7,000 islands along with the people above, I bought it out. $20 million purchased 300,000 square kilometers of land and 7 million living person on average. The life of a Filipino, it was worth less than $3 at the time. Kim, this is the law of the jungle. In those days, cruel and cold. It's impersonal. At that time, the Filipinos were still naive. Americans are here to liberate their beacon of democracy. As a result, the wolf was driven away. Welcome to the tiger. The Americans had no intention of leaving. They need a springboard, one that could send their grand fleet across the Pacific straight into the hinterland of the Far East. It can even deter the servants of the Qing Empire. At any time, aircraft carrier Filipinos are in a hurry. Pick up a machete and fight with the Americans. But how can flesh and blood stop the Maxim gun? 3 years of American war. More than 200,000 Filipino civilians died in war and famine. After taking it, Americans are starting to play high-end and give candy. Build a school to teach English. Hold elections for decades. The upper echelons of the Philippines, thoroughly beautified, put it in their heads it's all about Washington. Values. Americans don't just want to occupy your land and occupy your brain, but this is just a prophecy of disaster. Let the Philippines really see what it means. Hell on earth. It was World War II. Act 2. Michael Arthur's Pipe and Manila's Sea of Blood. December 1941. The smoke over Pearl Harbor has not yet cleared. Japanese bomb at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. Who was the commander of the U.S. military stationed in the Philippines at that time? The famous Michael Arthur, the one with the cornheart pipe. A showman with aviator sunglasses. Beaten like a stray dog early in the war, he ran off in a torpedo boat. Arrived in Australia, left behind that famous domineering quote, "I'll be back." But the ones he didn't take, 70,000 American and African coalition troops, after they surrendered, ushered in the most infamous in human military history, a single death march in temperatures of nearly 40 degrees. There's no water. There was no food, and the wounded dragged festering legs. Hundreds of kilometers in the muddy jungle, the Japanese soldiers' bayonets shone coldly in the sun. Anyone who takes a step slower or go to the gutter by the side of the road, take a sip of dirty green water, directly stabbed through the chest with a bayonet or a headshot. More than 10,000 people were tortured to death on the way. In the air, it's filled with the decay that characterizes the tropical jungle. Banana leaves mixed with the stinky smell of human blood. The cold of history. At this moment, the colossus turned into blackened corpses by the roadside. That's not the end. 3 years later, Michael Arthur did indeed carry a large fleet. The king is back, but his return, it did not bring salvation to the Philippines. It brought destruction. February 1945. Battle of Manila begins. Desperate Japanese are like mad dogs inside Manila. A horrific massacre unfolded in just 29 days. This ancient city is known as the Pearl of the Orient. It was blasted into a pile by the heavy artillery of the American Army. The Japanese butchers knifed more brutally, slashing at unarmed civilians. 100,000 Filipinos on the streets, in the church, Murdered in a hospital bed, countless families were torn apart under the knife of the Japanese army. Father is like old and weak, tragically killed without distinction. The entire Pasig River in Manila filled with the remains of the victims. The river was dyed a startling dark red. This is the cruelty of war. In this Shura arena, it doesn't matter who is right or wrong anymore. The lives of the common people. A big country in the meat grinder III would receive the certificate of independence on his knees. Well, Japan surrendered. World War II is over. The devastated Philippines finally hopes for peace. It stands to reason that you follow Big Brother America. Not only can you get war reparations, can you still do post-war reconstruction? Well, at this point, the Americans suddenly turned their backs, throwing out a magical script. I want to give you independence. Why did Americans suddenly find their conscience? I want to be a rich boy. Come on, although the United States was the world hegemon after the war, but I also owe a lot of national debt. The Philippines has been reduced to rubble. Millions of people are starving for food. If the Philippines were still a territory of the United States, then the U.S. government has to pay real money to prevent the disaster. To rebuild Wall Street, capitalists would be willing to pay for this money. I think it was the farmers in America at that time, extremely afraid of cheap agricultural products in the Philippines. For example, sugar and coconut oil enter the U.S. market duty-free, take their jobs. So there was a wave of activity in the United States, the frenzy that must kick the Philippines out, but kick it out, and kick it out. The dog chain must never be loosened. In 1946, the U.S. Congress passed two laws, a bill that can rub Filipinos on the ground. One was the Bell Trade Act. The other is the U.S. Non-Military Bases Agreement. These two bills, the dimensionality reduction strike of modern neocolonialism. So let's start with the Bell Trade Act. It clearly states American citizens and businesses in the Philippines enjoy the same rights as Filipinos. The natural resources of the Philippines can be exploited. It will run public utilities, and the Philippines must maintain a fixed exchange rate with the U.S. dollar. Without the consent of the President of the United States, the Philippines is not allowed to change exchange rates. This is equivalent to your door being forcibly removed. Not only can your neighbor come into your house and rummage through the refrigerator at any time, dig the mine in your yard, you have to listen to him, no matter how you spend the money in your wallet. Goods of a sovereign state, currency issuance rights, and tariff barriers. Completely castrated Filipinos are not stupid either. This humiliating treaty, who signs, who is a national sinner? The Philippine Congress at that time refused to sign, and the Americans laughed. I threw out a piece that Wang Fry didn't sign, right? Okay, the U.S. promised the Philippines $620 million post-war reconstruction funds. Don't get a penny. The whole of Manila is still in ruins. The common people can't even eat. Do you dare to take this life-saving money? Eventually, the Philippine elites gave in. They even tried to satisfy the Americans, forcibly amended the Philippine Constitution, and in the military U.S. non-military bases agreement directly to the Philippines became the front line of the United States. The United States rents for free. 23 military bases are maintained in the Philippines. Leases last an astounding 99 years. The famous Subi Bay Naval Base and Clark Air Force Base. That's how it came in these bases. American soldiers enjoy foreign rights even if they are on the street. Kill the Filipino people. The Philippine police have no right to arrest people. July 4, 1946. That magnificent certificate of independence, the Filipino took it on his knees. They got the ostensible national anthem and flag, but handed over the economic lifeline of the country and military sovereignty act for the blood and tears of the Chinese. And the rise of the game of great powers. We Chinese look at this history always feel familiar indeed. In this bureau, we can't forget another group under the water, Filipino Chinese. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II, there is an armed force that scares the Japanese called the Overseas Chinese Anti-Japanese Guerrilla Detachment, HUAJI for short. This team, composed of Chinese people in the rainforest, fought a guerrilla war with the Japanese for 3 years. Large and small have weathered more than 260 battles with blood and life, defended the land where they lived. However, after the Philippines gained independence in 1946, these anti-Japanese heroes are waiting not flowers and applause. It was brutal repression. Why is that? Because America's Cold War king has spilled down in the Far East. The United States wants to create the first island chain to lock the Asian continent on this grand geopolitical chessboard. Japan is the anchor to the north. The Philippines is the heart of the south. The Americans are definitely not allowed to enter the Philippines. There exists any left-wing forces or invading power. Therefore, with the benefit of the United States, the Philippine government began making mass arrests, persecute former anti-Japanese guerrillas. Many Chinese were forced into exile and even assassinated. You see, this is the ruthlessness of the great power game. The Philippines is an excellent archipelago. His fate was never in his own hands. He's just America in the Western Pacific. A sharp knife inserted. The tip of the knife is facing the rising eastern dragon, the fifth act of the emasculated country, the second twilight in Asia. We're going into the 50s and 60s. If you travel back in time to Manila in those days, you will be amazed by the prosperity in front of you. A broad road, towering skyscrapers, American Ford cars running down the street, Hollywood jazz in a high-class cabaret. The Philippines at that time GDP is second only to Japan in Asia, known as the second richest man in Asia. But this is an extremely deformed prosperity. It's a mirage built on sand dunes. Why do you say so? Because of the Bell Trade Act. The blood-sucking chain is in American manufactured goods are like a tide. Tax-free influx into the Philippines directly integrate the national industry of the Philippines. Strangled in the cradle. The Philippines doesn't need to make steel, no need to build machines. They only need to grow bananas for Americans. You just cut sugarcane for copper. This is called economics. Resource providers on the periphery. This false prosperity. It's all about American military procurement and economic aid. Hang on a breath. During the reign of the Marx family, this deformity reached its peak. On one side is Mrs. Marx, Imelda. In the closet, 3,000 pairs of luxury custom high heels. Each pair of shoes is studded with sparkling jewelry. On the other side are the sprawling slums of Manila. Countless families are in the trash. Pick up other people's leftover fried chicken bones, wash it up, and cook the soup again. It's called paypag. An economy without heavy industry, like a fat man without a skeleton. Fall when the wind blows. By the late 70s, early 80s, the global economic crisis has erupted. Less attention in the United States. The Philippines' economic bubble burst in an instant. The exchange rate plummeted. High foreign debt. This used to be Asia's second road in free fall. Ultimately, it became today one of the world's largest labor exporters. Tens of millions of Filipinos have had to flee their homes, go to the world to be a woman, be a sailor. Is this just the corruption of politicians? Not from 1946. The Independence Act begins from their acceptance of their own country. Foreign troops are stationed from the moment the economic lifeline is controlled by outsiders. This tragic fate is already doomed. There is a saying in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, must be fixed. Americans are safe in this way. They gave the Philippines a false name for independence. The Philippines today, still swaying between the cracks of the superpowers, still tied to the chariot in the first island chain in front of the Machiang clan. Looking at Subic Bay again, the first U.S. warship to enter and exit. I don't know about Filipinos today, in the dead of night. Will you remember the scene on July 4th, 1946? False orgy. History is cold, but the lesson he taught everyone. But always so hot. Next issue, we turn our attention to the powder keg of the Middle East. Go see the one used by the British Empire ruler on the desert map, a country that is drawn by force. One in the power clip, the artificial kingdom of crazy tightrope walking in the scene. 1946 Jordan's thrilling Independence Bureau. Follow Yang. We'll see you next time.